Okay, the next four children's stories by review quickly are The Cards and the Potter. The Cards is about the deal you're handed in life and about being shuffled up and about being made uncomfortable. The same thing applies to being on the potter's wheel and being fashioned by the potter. When the pressure comes on, the cracks appear. All done in a story which is entertaining for children but has some depth of moral included. The next one on the list is, I'm looking at my laptop here, just make sure I get them in order. Evelyn Started It All is a true story about a girl with a hair lip, double hair lip and a cleft palate, and it's her story, and it teaches children to not tease people who have got deformities. That's also done in an entertaining way. How Practical Is Your Joke is a true story about nurses who decided to play a joke on the night shift orderly by making it appear that one of the people on the trolley was dead, who wasn't dead. It was one of the nurses they wrapped up to make it look like it was dead, and the trolley is being pushed up to the morgue and it's on a slight hill, and when she reveals that she's not dead, he is so scared that he lets the trolley go, and the trolley goes careering down the path and smashes the trolley, and luckily nobody's hurt. And it's all about the ramifications of that joke, and it's asking questions when you're going to play a joke. Is it a practical joke? What sort of ramifications, what sort of costs are there going to be to your joke? And that not all jokes are jokes. So again, it's a story with a moral. Next one is Camping Adventure, and it is a true story about two boys who go camping, and in the night the river rises, and apart from the local farmer taking an interest and knowing that the river was rising, things could have been drastically different. Great story for young people to read, and these are all classed at different levels of graded reading. The Kite Competition is a fictional story about a father who builds the biggest kite, the largest kite, with his son, and they go to a kite flying competition, and the father uses the winch on the four-wheel drive to pull in some line, and they connect a hammock to it to allow the boy to be lifted up several feet above the four-wheel drive. Another kite flies into the kite, and the weight is too much and it snaps, and the kite, because it has the weight of the boy on the bottom of the line, is carried out to sea, ever rising. And it's about the authorities chasing the boy, and how the Air Force manages to deal with the parachute as the day is fading. And it's asking questions about doing things with dads and things going wrong, and how important your children are and relationships and the mother's response. So that's a interesting story also. Fun in the Bush is also a true story about when some old gum trees were cut down to be sawn up for firewood, and a white owl is disturbed, or a nocturnal animal, and that being taken to a wildlife park, and the person involved then goes back and visits that park years later, because white owls are not that common in Australia. They're run over by cars and the headlights mainly. And it's a true story. It's asking some questions about being kind to animals and the adventure of being in the bush. And then we have a really, really exciting story, and lots of feedback on this one. The Tree House, where the tree grows out over an angle over the river, and the parents only allow the boys to use the tree house because if they ever fell out of the tree house they'd fall into the river. and they're allowed to do a sleepover, but there's a bushfire, and it's about whether the boys are game enough to jump or not jump, and the father's response to knowing that his son is in, and his two mates are in jeopardy in the front of the fire front. So that's a very interesting story too. Now I'll just step off camera a second to get the last one. We'll do it on this video. Excuse me. The next one is the railway bridge, and it's about a young guy who's about 20 years old, who's deaf and cannot speak because he's never learned to be able to pronounce words. And it's about the guys that were building the railway lines back in the perhaps nearly 100 years ago in New Zealand, and this guy walking up and down the railway lines befriending the railway workers, and there's a big viaduct built, and the train comes across the viaduct, and he has to hold on to the railway sleepers hanging over the edge while the train passes, and this becomes an issue for this particular guy, and it's about how the railway workers find a solution for him should that disaster ever befall him again. A racy little story. These stories are all quite short. They're all certainly none of them that I've mentioned them exceed 10 minutes in a read for a good night story. The Flashing Sun is a little longer, probably about 15 minutes, maybe a 20-minute read, and is quite in depth. It's about 3 children with polio who use semaphore to communicate with one another, and how they help a pilot in distress manage to land his aeroplane at night, because they can actually send Morse code with lights. And that is a fictional story with quite a bit of substance. We then move on to, excuse me because my eyes are not so good, yes, a New Year's party, and again it's a true story of some older boys who used some explosives down a water pipe and put it out in one of the rock pools in front of the batches, and set it off at midnight on New Year's Eve and blow all the windows out of the batches along the front, and the troubles that they get into. There's a backstory for the little boys who are out rabbiting, and unfortunately a snake gets caught in the rabbit trap, and they use the snake to play a trick on their mother, and it's asking some questions about behaviour, and these are all stories where you can talk to whoever they're being read to, or by the parents, about, well, what would you do in that situation? They're specifically written that way. Educating Greenie is all about a parrot that Kia, it's a New Zealand parrot that lives up in the high country, being nursed by a skier who's trapped in one of the ski huts that are specifically placed in the high country for skiers that get caught in bad weather. And it's the life story of how this skier is nursed back to health, and how friendships can develop between animals and humans. That's a great story. The next one on the list is The Cave. The Cave is all about a boy discovering a cave while he's rabbiting using ferrets. There's one Lost, which is a discussion about the difference between knowledge of bushcraft by an Aboriginal boy and a person who starts off being thinking that Aboriginals don't have much brains, and then this particular guy realises within their own skill base they have a lot of understanding, and the difference between whether this guy gets lost, who'd been trail bike riding, and whether he's saved is dependent upon a young Aboriginal boy leading him back with using bushcraft skills to keep them both alive. Then we come to the puppy dog story, which is a true story, which is about a little puppy dog that growls in the night, and the person gets up and realises that there are burglars in the house next door, and the girl rings the police, and the police come, and it's all about how those guys get caught in the act of burglaring the house next door, and it was only possible because of the quiet growling of the dog in the middle of the night that revealed what was going on next door. So that's an exciting children's story. And then there's a true fishing story in there about, and it might seem impossible, but go and read the story, how a person caught a large shark by the tail without a hook. So there we go. That's 24 out of the 25 stories. That's enough for this particular video. These stories are put on here specifically to achieve what all I've talked about, but also to build trust with the parents that would be reading them, to then be looking at the other books that are on the site. The idea is that you would have felt that by the time you've read all those children's stories to your children, or gotten them to read them themselves, that this site, gradedreading.com, has given you more than the site would ever ask. The site is asking you for the price of one coffee, $3.99, to download first the audio sampler to prove that you like it, and then the book Dream Bouncing, which is a 6-year effort. Unfortunately, authors don't get paid much these days, especially in the ebook world, and we have to live. So everything can't be given away free, and neither should it be. A workman's worthy of his hire. 6 years' work went into Dream Bouncing by my co-writer and myself. It's a wonderful read. We're encouraging you to download it. If you don't feel that you've had at least $3.99's worth of pleasure out of graded reading from all the children's stories, then don't feel obligated to download any of the books and actually buy a book off the site. But we believe that for the English resource for the second language students, and to everybody comes to the site, that the site should give as much as it would ever ask for. So I think there is now 11 books that are adult books that are for sale on site. At this stage, only Dream Bouncing has been co-written, and the other ones are in the form that I write, and I don't write that well. And very soon, Four Bastard Sons to Iran will be co-written, so look out for that too. So until we bring out the next video, goodbye from gradedreading.com. I'm Ronald Sharp. Cheers.